Hi everyone, thanks so much for following the Meet Me for Coffee podcast on the road. We are back at it again, creating more special edition content here at the Trimble Insight 2025 conference in New Orleans, Louisiana. If you guys like the content that you watch in this episode, be sure to go back and check out the channel to see all of the other amazing on-site interviews that are taking place this week here in New Orleans. And thanks for meeting us for coffee. Hi everyone, thanks so much for listening in again to the Meet Me for Coffee podcast here at the Trimble Insight Conference. I'm excited to be talking with Adam this morning. Adam, how are you doing?
Great, doing well, excited to be here in New Orleans.
Yeah, it's been a good morning. Did you attend the opening session this morning?
I did. Rob gave a great talk, Michael gave a great talk.
There was a band at the beginning.
Yeah,
I was like,
exciting.
wow, that's one way to wake you up. They had a New Orleans band out.
Absolutely.
So it was an exciting opening session. Lots of talk this morning about connecting systems and AI and strategy and innovation. So excited to see that theme kind of play out the next couple of days. For anyone who's listening, maybe doesn't know who you are and what you do yet, can you enlighten us and tell you more about yourself?
Yeah, so my name's Adam McElhinney. I'm CEO of a predictive maintenance software company called Uptake. So we help customers really reduce unplanned downtime and reduce maintenance costs. So how we do that, we'll take all the data that flows on a truck. There could be upwards of 600 different sensor data points that you'll get on a Class 8 truck. We'll take all that data off the truck live, real time, typically by integrating with their existing telematics device. And then we run that through a number of pre-trained machine learning algorithms that we developed. So we can get really precise. We can say, hey, truck 1234 is having a coolant issue. And we can even differentiate between, let's say, like a coolant sensor issue versus a coolant pump issue versus a coolant leak.
Yeah. Well, I actually read quite a bit about your background and about the work that Uptake does because having never been in asset fleet myself, I wasn't super familiar with the work, but I found it really interesting. So usually I'm like, okay, I need to get a general sense of what's going on here, but I found myself, I kept reading, I was looking into it. And I have to ask this question because I noticed that Uptake works across a variety of industries. You're not just in trucking.
No.
And I really appreciate people who have a view from some other industries when we're talking about what we do here. How do you feel that we're doing in the trucking and logistics industry when it comes to embracing new technologies when we compare ourselves against other sectors?
Yeah, I think trucking in general is really starting to embrace technology. Earlier in my career, I worked in financial services, and they're extremely sophisticated from their leverage of data and technology, right? So, if you think about financial services in the 80s and 90s, something like mortgage approvals or credit card underwriting was really kind of a human that kind of looked you in the eye and thought, is this person a good credit risk or not? And in some ways, the trucking industry is still kind of in that phase where a lot of maintenance supervisors or fleet managers are still kind of, looking at the truck, using their subject matter expertise and wisdom to diagnose and optimize the maintenance plan. And that can be very successful, but the problem is, there's only so many of those subject matter experts that you're going to have in a given fleet, and many of them may be getting older and starting to retire. So we're seeing trucking companies really start to look for innovative ways of leveraging software and data to really take that subject matter knowledge that may be locked up in the organization and then embed it into a process that can be deployed out across the whole fleet.
And so would you say that, that out of curiosity, I know that the pandemic kind of threw everyone a curveball, but one of the things that it seemed to have done is accelerate our interest in adaptation in new technology in the space. So what have the last few years looked like? Are we continuing to see this acceleration of willingness to explore and adapt new technologies across our trucking space?
Yeah, penetration is definitely continuing to grow. The market really shifted. During COVID, it was just get loads on the trucks, get the load there as quickly as you can. It was kind of all hands on deck. It was definitely chaotic. Trucking prices went nuts. It was very difficult to get new equipment. We're definitely seeing kind of maybe a renormalization of the market. We're also seeing trucking companies start to hold their trucks longer right now with all the uncertainty around environmental regulations. That's prompting, more difficulties from a maintenance perspective. Older trucks typically will have more problems than newer trucks, but at the same time, we don't have the part shortages or kind of, mad dash that there was during COVID as well. So, we've definitely seen definitely seen shifts over the past couple of years. With the market being where it is right now, trucking companies are really trying to squeeze every penny and, really reduce cost of ownership as much as possible and reduce cost per mile as well.
Sure. And so I read your bio. You've done a lot of impressive work when it comes to data, machine learning, AI.
Thank you.
Yes, I was really interested in some of that. And I have heard this consistent theme or topic, if you will, in our industry. As, like you said, we've been embracing technology, and all of a sudden it's like we found ourselves in data overload.
Yeah.
And we're measuring everything. And I had someone explain a truck to me, I think it was Trimble last year. They were like, do you realize our trucks are more like computers now than anything?
Yeah.
And so we have all of these data points that we can extract and put somewhere, but then it's like, what are we doing with all of this data? And so where we've been missing, I think, or there's so many areas of opportunity to improve, is actually figuring out how to take the data and use it, and also not just use it like looking backwards. Like, because then we saw that. We're like, okay, well, let's pull out all the data and let's evaluate it and let's see where something went wrong or what went wrong or how we can fix it next time.
Yep.
And it's like, well, that's nice, but how do we become more like actionable, real-time, data-driven decision makers in an industry that, I mean, trucking is an old industry, and it is not overly complicated, but the trucks are getting more complicated, the demands are getting more complicated, maintenance is getting more complicated. So how are we actually using this data to make decisions that help us today and not, looking backwards?
Well, there's a couple interesting trends there. One, the quantity and variety of data that we're getting is really increasing. So, maybe 10 years ago, you might get some DTC codes or fault codes off a truck. Now it's not uncommon for commercial telematics devices to make hundreds of sensor data points available on a truck. Now what we're seeing too is a lot more kind of ancillary data sets. These are things like third-party tire pressure monitoring systems or automatic tire inflation systems. This is data off lift gates. This is data off reefer systems. You're starting to see smart trailers. So fleets are definitely coming to us and saying, Adam, I'm drowning in all this data. I don't know what any of it means. It's several people's full-time job to try to parse through it and make all the dashboards. But like you said, dashboards look certainly a great place to start, but many times at that point, there's already been a problem or it's kind of too late, right? So, that definitely is a starting point where we're seeing a lot of fleets start to think about, all right, how can I get ahead of these patterns before they manifest into problems that impact my operations, while at the same time ingesting all this data from all these new sources of, again, trailer or liftgate or tire data sets that, maybe weren't prevalent 5 or 10 years ago.
Yeah. And I think it sounds almost oversimplified even when we just talk about it the way I kind of teed that up to, because we talk about the data, where does it all go? That's something that I've seen people struggle with. You're collecting data in 5 different tools or systems, but where is it actually? Is it being stored somewhere? Or are you even able to capture it and store it? And so then you see, people who are really data driven are trying to figure out how to get it all into one type of tool or database and then figure out what to do with it. And so it's just been a really, I guess, interesting progression in what do you think the future of this looks like for us in the next couple of years?
I definitely think the breadth and quantity of data is going to continue to grow. I think these third-party data sets like tires and trailers and lift gates and car lifts and kind of, anything that's attached to the truck, that's going to continue to grow. Customers are going to want better integration between their maintenance systems and these other sources of data. They're going to want better integration between their warehouse management systems and these better sources of data. Those are going to continue to just grow as pain points. Like you said, where does this data even go and how do we all get it into a single spot? That trend is definitely going to continue. It'll be interesting to see, where the truck market goes. Trucking companies themselves, the trucking OEMs are trying to launch data products as well. Many customers we talk to are resistant to use them because, most trucking companies operate trucks for many different brands. So they want one system that's going to work for all of their different systems. So I think that'll continue to be a trend.
Yeah. How do you see Uptake's role in the industry kind of evolving to lead, positive change for fleets in the next couple of years?
Yeah, I mean, we're really laser focused on helping customers with those two problems: reduce maintenance spend, reduce unplanned downtime. We see that focus is really a strength of ours, right?
Sure.
We try to not get distracted by, new buzzwords or things with kind of an uncertain ROI case. Our best customer is a customer where we can come in and say, hey, you're going to spend $1 with Uptake and you're going to get $4 or $5 back in terms of ROI. So we try to really start with the dollars, start with the ROI, and then plan backwards from that and just make sure everything we're doing for customers delivers a tangible, measurable benefit. If we continue to see a soft truck market too, frankly, customers are going to demand that. They're not going to buy something where the value proposition may be soft or difficult to measure.
Yeah. And I think, to that point, as someone who follows the markets, I think that this previous notion of, well, the market will eventually change and we'll make all this money and everything will be great. Like, I think we're going to start seeing less volatility in these swings in our marketplace as more technology comes in to
Sure.
drive pricing. But I also think that's something that the last few years has taught us, it's just a permanent lesson, is that it does not matter the market conditions.
Yeah.
We still need to make sure that our fleets are running as optimal as possible.
Yep.
And that we are actually taking care of every cent that our fleet is spending,
Yep.
no matter how much we're making,
I
right?
think
So
you're
we
right.
can actually be optimizing that. And now we have the technology to kind of spotlight if we're not doing that, I think, too.
Yeah, absolutely. I think nobody would have anticipated the market being where it's at right now, kind of 4 or 5 years ago, and who knows where it's going to be 4 or 5 years from now. But I think you're right. A strong focus on just dollars and cents, cost control,
Yeah.
optimizing the value of your assets that you have is going to continue to be a theme.
Yeah, Rob Painter actually said it this morning in his opening session, and I appreciated it. And he said, like a 1% improvement here leads to a 1% improvement in another part of your fleet,
Yeah.
which leads to another 1% improvement in another part. And then they talked about like compounding benefits over the months and the years.
Yep.
And so I think that that's really like necessary these days for fleets to take this long-term approach to what they're doing.
Yeah,
to
I think you're
optimize.
absolutely right. Yeah, his analogy of compounding was, as a person who enjoys math, that was fun to see. So
Yeah. He did a good job there with that. Everybody in the audience did a pretty good job with their quick math on choosing the option.
I think they suspected it was a trick. So
We're always ready for that. I would like to ask, before we wrap up, what is, like, if you could give one piece of advice to fleets right now as they head into the end of the year and into
Sure.
a new year, what would that piece of advice be?
I mean, there's one KPI every fleet should be tracking, and you'd be shocked how many fleets I talk to don't have a great answer to this, and that's really fleet availability. There's a number of different ways to measure it, but basically you need to know, if I have 100 trucks at any given time, what percentage of those can I send out to make money, right? And if they're not available, then you need to break it down. Is because we're waiting for parts? Is it because it's doing planned maintenance? Is it doing unplanned maintenance? Or is there some type of maintenance violation? I'll routinely talk with trucking companies, and they won't have a good baseline for that stat, or they'll have 3 or 4 different ways of measuring that stat, and they won't really have like kind of an agreed upon metric within the company. That really is the number one maintenance KPI that all fleets should be paying attention to.
Awesome. And I guess one second question when it comes to technology. If you were a fleet right now, how would you encourage them to be going through like an evaluation process or engaging with technology companies and providers to figure out what works for them?
I mean, look, at any given time, fleets should have kind of a portfolio of business goals that they're striking to achieve, and then a kind of a panel of experiments or pilots or initiatives that they're undertaking to achieve those business goals. Selfishly, that could be leveraging a technology like Uptake, but that could also be internal initiatives that they're working on as well. And I think fleets that are really successful have people that are dedicated to these different initiatives, these different pilots. They view them as kind of a portfolio of experiments, just like a marketer would have a portfolio of different marketing messaging that they're testing or whatever it might be. And then they're constantly seeing, okay, where are we seeing results? Where are we not seeing results? And adapting their strategy.
Well, thank you for the advice, and thank you for making time at a conference to come be on a podcast.
My pleasure.
I appreciate that. I do want to ask you before we wrap up, is this your first time attending the Trimble Insight Conference?
No, this is my second time. Last year was in Las Vegas. It was a great conference. made a lot of professional connections, had fun as well. Really excited to be here in New Orleans, and we'll be excited to go to San Diego next year.
Yeah, I saw that announcement. San Diego is always a fun place for a
especially
conference,
in the fall or winter, right?
Yes, absolutely. It's good timing for it.
Yep.
Well, thank you again for making time to be on the Meet Me for Coffee podcast. It was a pleasure having you.
My pleasure. Thank you.
Thanks for meeting us for coffee today. If you enjoyed the show, be sure to check out our channels and subscribe. It would also mean a lot if you could leave us a rating or a review. If you're listening on LinkedIn, feel free to drop your thoughts or your questions in the comment section, and we'd be happy to get back to you. Thanks again.